The gospel should not just cause us to surrender our life, but it should cause us to seek to further the cause. Look at verse 20. Straightway. That means immediately. Straightway, immediately. What did he do? Immediately, he preached Christ in the synagogues that he's the Son of God. I don't see anybody twisting his arm. I don't see anybody guilting Saul and saying, you got to go do this. You got to fill your quota. I don't see any of that. What do I see? It convicts me what I see because I think about me, right? I see a man who was so changed by the gospel is that as soon as he had the strength to do it, immediately he was out there telling other people about Christ. And from this day on, if I can say this word, shut up's not a nice word, but you couldn't shut him up. There was no silencing him. Until his head was literally removed from his body, there was not going to be a moment that Saul wasn't going to tell somebody, that Paul wasn't going to tell somebody about what Jesus did for him. Isn't that powerful? I think the gospel meant something to him. How can there be 7 billion people in our world and only half of them that have ever heard the gospel message? That's 3.5-ish plus billion people that have never heard a clear presentation. How is that possible? I think there's a lot of Christians, myself included, who have lost a handle on what the gospel means. How important it is to us. How much it's done for us. How much God has done for us. How much we should want to do nothing but to tell somebody else about what God has done. He sought to further the cause. You say, well, I'm not a gospel enemy, but I'd ask you this. As a direct result of our lives, is the gospel message being spread farther to reach more lives around us and beyond? Can we look back and say, hey, God helped me to have an eternal impact through this and through this and through this? If not, why not? Is the gospel important to us? What did Paul call it in Corinthians? What did Paul call it in Timothy? He called the gospel glorious, right? It was the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ. I love that phrase, right? Why was it gospel already means good news. That wasn't good enough. He said this is the glorious good news. Why? Because he knew what he was saved from. He knew what he was. He knew what he could have been. And he knew what God had made him to be. And he said this message is awesome. And we overuse that word awesome, but I think this is the right usage of that word awesome, right? The gospel message is awesome, what God has done. Lastly, we're done. He sacrificed all for the sake of Christ. Look at verse 23. And after that, verse 23, after that many days were fulfilled, the Jews took counsel to kill him. But their laying await was known of Saul, and they watched the gates day and night to kill him. And the disciples took him by night and let him down by the wall in a basket. I think that's significant. This kind of gospel change we don't like to talk about. Saul left Jerusalem how? An important man. He was rich. This ties in a little bit to the blessing you were talking about this morning. He was rich. He seemed to be a blessed man. He had power. He had authority. He had money. I mean, he was an important guy. The gospel changed him. How did he leave the city? He left in a basket, like a criminal, and could never return to his things or belongings back in Jerusalem. Can you imagine what he gave up? Not only did he surrender all, not only did he seek to further the cause, but he sacrificed everything for the sake of Christ. I don't think that I know I don't know, in many ways, what true sacrifice means. Why was he willing to do that? Why in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 at the end is he going to say, hey, all my suffering is light? And he suffered more than anyone besides Jesus himself. How could he say that kind of thing? Because he said the eternal weight of glory, right, far outweighs anything temporal that goes on here. Right? He has his perspective on what? I'm going to go to heaven one day, and I'm going to take as many as I can with me, right? To live as Christ, to die as gain. Actually, he compared all the influence and affluence and money. He compared all those things in Philippians to what? He compared him to dung, right? Can you think of a worse word? He said all that means nothing, right? Compared to the gospel, compared to what Jesus can do in my life, in your life, and in others' lives, it's nothing. Doesn't mean a thing.